Now, one of the reasons I love having my next guest on the program each and every week is because he's not only the best-selling author of hugely important works, including The Madness of Crowds and The War on the West, but Douglas Murray is also the smartest man in the room, any room, and can be relied upon to fact-check all manner of idiocy pushed by ideological zealots like academic and writer Simon Moyer-Smith, who shared this pearl of wisdom on Twitter. He wrote, "Before white people came to this land, there were no jails, no homelessness, no laws against homosexuality or abortion. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples emphasised health, housing, freedom to love who you love, and the fact that we need Mother Earth. She doesn't need us." Douglas, welcome to the program. I barely know where to start with that. Was life really as idyllic as Simon suggests before the arrival of white people? Was there no jails, no homelessness, no laws against homosexuality and abortion? That is true.
Yeah, one of the reasons why there were no laws against homosexuality or abortion was because there were no laws. That's a very important place to start from. The concept of law, of equality before the law, and much more. These are horrible, racist Western inventions, of course. As for the other, the equitable things that apparently existed before the dreaded white man arrived, yes, I mean, I imagine they included a retirement age of 60 or something like that, or, oh no, life expectancy wasn't that high. Anyway, I'm sure that this is known as a particular sort of virus of the Western mind. And the virus is the idea that nothing can be bad in the world unless we in the West made it so. The 18th century philosopher Rousseau was a famous advocate of this theory that the white man stumbled into other countries and always discovered Eden. And we always effectively ruined Eden. And people followed Rousseau, including one famous French ship landed in New Zealand. Most of its crew were killed and probably eaten by the local tribe. Discovered that Rousseau wasn't on to everything in theory. But nevertheless, this is a constant, and you can always find a sort of cut-price academic like this previously unknown entity you've just cited, who can always be relied upon to blame absolutely everything on dead white men, and believe that if it wasn't for them, as I say, the rest of the world would be living in absolute paradise. Unfortunately, the only thing that he doesn't have on his side are the facts.
And even just current facts. Is he not aware of, I don't know, the Middle East, for example? Is he not aware?
He'd have an answer to that. Rita. These same people claim that, for instance, the Middle East and Africa were places which did not know misogyny and had not come across homophobia until the white man introduced them. They actually seriously claim that repeatedly. Because they say you can never attribute any responsibility to anyone else. The world in these people's minds is divided into the white man who brings all these evils, and then the supplicant, suffering native who otherwise, as I say, would be basically Adam and Eve without the serpent in the garden.
Look, we can sit here and mock these types, but imagine working your whole life so you can send your kid to university, pay these enormous fees, and to have someone like that determine their academic progress. I mean, it's pretty depressing. Now, we've had some interesting hearings over the last 24 hours with testimony from Twitter Files journalists, including Matt Taibbi and Michael Shellenberger, who were attacked and defamed by Democrats for exposing Twitter's collusion with the Democrats and government agencies. These two have been painted as some sort of, I don't know, right-wing reactionaries, despite the fact that they're both of the left, the old school left. Let's have a quick look at a couple of the interactions.
You crossed that line with the Twitter Files.
No.
Elon Musk, it's my time. Please do not interrupt me. Elon Musk spoon-fed you his cherry-picked information which you must have suspected promotes a slanted viewpoint or at the very least generates another right-wing conspiracy theory. You violated your own standard, and you appear to have benefited from it.
Mr. Schellenberger, are you a Republican?
No, I'm not.
You got any, pro-Trump bumper stickers on your car?
I voted for Biden.
Voted for Biden.
This is a tried and tested strategy. We saw the Democrat politician there at the start. You just attack the messenger. You paint them as racist, as a right-wing, compromised individual, rather than try to defend what they've been revealing.
Absolutely. It's the desire of the Democrats in these hearings to portray everyone who says anything they disagree with as frothing at the mouth right-wing maniacs. I know quite a lot of frothing at the mouth right-wing maniacs. And I also slightly know Schellenberger and Taibbi, and they are definitely not frothing at the mouth right-wing maniacs. As Schellenberger said just there, he's a Biden voter, leftist, centrist, has lots of views I would probably regard as a little squishy, but he's certainly no right-wing maniac. Matt Taibbi made his name at Rolling Stone magazine, which nobody could say was a sort of right-wing bastion. But this is just the Democrat playbook. The problem they have is it's quite hard to portray either Michael Schellenberger or Matt Taibbi as frothing at the mouth right-wing maniacs, but they're going to do a drive-by shooting on their reputations anyway. If you listened also to what was happening, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz there was demonstrating that she can only read very poorly from a cue card by one of her researchers. She and others involved in the hearings cited another person I know who certainly isn't a frothing at the mouth right-wing maniac either, Barry Weiss, formerly of the New York Times, now of the Free Press. Several of them talked about Barry Weiss as Mr. Weiss. They didn't even seem to be aware of the sex of the person they were talking about. See, these are people who think they know everything about what is in the Twitter files, everything that you and I and everyone else in the rest of the world should be allowed to know, but they can't get even basic facts straight themselves. I thought that the whole thing was a charade. It was laughable, and I'm very pleased to see that Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi actually openly laughed at members of Congress who were questioning them, because it was a laughable political stunt that they were being put through.
They weren't even being artful about the slander. It was just so ugly and adolescent almost in its tone. It really was quite pathetic. Now, talking about Twitter, you got into a bit of a Twitter spat yesterday with former footballer turned, well, grossly overpaid if you ask me, and painfully woke BBC presenter Gary Lineker, who has likened the UK government to Nazi Germany for the crime of wanting to enforce border protection laws. I mean, let's have a look at the UK government. I mean, it's led by people of colour, that term that Gary Lineker likes. I mean, did you at least manage to enlighten poor Gary about the error of his ways?
No, I mean, I feel rather sad for people like Gary Lineker. I mean, he's obviously hit too many balls with his head over the years, and it's had some consequences, clearly. His historical reach is so brilliant that he reaches for the anyone I don't like must be a Nazi analogy. All of the people you saw put up there, of course, would definitely pass all of the Aryan tests of the Nazi party. Gary Lineker is a strange one. I mean, I'm not. I said to him, on Twitter. First of all, I mean, the unbelievable crassness of comparing just having a border policy, any border policy, a border policy that actually enforces your borders, comparing that to what Jews went through in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, it's absolutely grotesque to the survivors of that period. It's a grotesque defamation on top of that of the British government, and indeed of any government that believes in controlling borders. And I'm slightly mystified in this era why people like Gary Lineker don't pay some kind of price for this. I mean, I want to hear Gary Lineker talking about border policy about as much as I want to see the Home Secretary playing football or indeed commenting on the match. I don't think it's his place. The reason why this is a controversy is because Gary Lineker is paid for by the the BBC and paid the highest salary, I think, of anyone at the BBC, 1.4 million a year or something like that,
gosh.
to talk about football. And whether or not a state-funded broadcaster should allow its top-paid presenter to say that the government of the day is effectively Nazi is a question for the BBC. It's a question I would answer quite swiftly, which would be no.
I do wonder whether Gary Lineker went over to Qatar for the World Cup because Qatar right now, not historically, has some practices in place that have been likened, I would say accurately, to modern day slavery with the way they treat their foreign workers. But, you know, that's held to a different standard. Now, let's talk some royals. I'm interested in your take on this interaction between the future Queen, Kate, and a Muslim community leader who refused to shake her outstretched hand. He seems very polite there, but you can see Kate's veiled. She's trying to be culturally sensitive. I can tell you I've got some issues with that myself personally, but I'll put those to one side. What do you make of that refusal of the handshake? Is that something that we should just respect, or is there an expectation that if you live in the West, then there's a level of assimilation where shaking hands with a woman is not seen as taboo?
You know, I think it's quite a telling exchange. As I've said for some years, diversity in countries like Britain, I think Australia to a great extent, is expected in recent years to be a one-way street. You know, the society has to adapt to the migrant, not the migrant to the society. And I think that's just a fundamental mistake. At best, it means that your society becomes a sort of version of the United Nations on a good day. And at worst, it leads to a total balkanization. The Muslim prohibition on certain interpretations of Islam's prohibition on men shaking the hands of women who are not their wife is one of those sort of things that, you know, it may lead them into error, that merely squeezing the palm of a woman might lead them to even greater naughtiness. Well, that's not our view in Britain any more than it is in Australia or America. And my own view is that this is just a symptom of, I think Kate behaved absolutely impeccably as always. But the fact that the man in question thought he could do that was a demonstration that for him, at any rate, it's a one-way street. You move to Britain, you get a welfare state, you get various other benefits, you can bring family, you can have all sorts of perks. But if there's anything even as basic as a certain show of courtesy of the kind we believe in, such as equality of the sexes, then no, the host society is meant to adapt to you. I think that's totally the wrong way around. I don't think it's Kate's fault that she came across this. I think it's the fault of the society for giving off the impression for years that, you know, you could accept our values, or if you didn't want to, you didn't have to. I think that was a lamentable decision. It's been going on for decades, but that's the attitude many people have just imbibed from our countries, which is essentially a sort of pushover.
Mm-hmm. And I would have liked to have seen Kate without the veil there. I think in many ways that sends a powerful message to women living under Islam who are fighting these compulsory hijab laws, to see empowered Western women abide by them for cultural sensitivities. For those women, I know sends a very poor message. And finally, Harry and Meghan's little girl, Lilibet, has been christened. She's been christened Princess Lilibet this week, with the titles of her and her brother being updated on the palace website. So he's no longer Master Archie, he's Prince Archie, and she's a princess. Surely this is the ultimate embrace of unearned privilege by a couple who supposedly rail against such vulgarities?
I would say, Rita, that if you haven't done so already, I will do this, is to just check whether the domain names of the have been bought yet by somebody in California. I would have thought by now we will have seen website domain names bought under the new princely and princessly titles. And there will then be a maximum attempt to squeeze the maximum amount of cash out of the titles in question, which of course come from a horribly defunct and out-of-date institution, which nevertheless it happens that both Harry and Meghan really enjoy squeezing out being a part of.
Douglas Murray, author of the now in paperback #1 bestseller, War on the West. Thank you for joining me.
It's a great pleasure as always. Thank you.